Chapter 17 The Yellow Pool of Turia. At the edge of the Yellow Pool of Turia, Harold and I stood, now freed of the slave bar, but with wrists tied behind our backs. I had not been given back my sword, but the quiver I had carried was now thrust within my belt. The pool is indoors in a spacious chamber in the house of Safar, with a domed ceiling of some 80 feet in height. The pool itself, round which there is a marble walkway, some 7 or 8 feet in width, is roughly circular in shape, and has a diameter perhaps 60 or 70 feet. The room itself is very lovely, and might have been one of the chambers in the renowned baths of Turia. It was decorated with numerous exotic floral designs, done primarily in greens and yellows, representing the vegetation of a tropical river, perhaps the tropical belt of Cartius, or certain of its tributaries far to the north and west. Besides the designs, there were also, growing from planted areas, recessed here and there in the marble walkway, broad-leafed curling plants, vines, ferns, and numerous exotic flowers. It was all rather beautiful, but in an oppressive way, and the room had been heated to such an extent that it seemed almost steamy. I gathered the temperature and humidity in the room were desirable for the plantings, or were supposed to simulate the climate of the tropical area represented. The light in the room came, interestingly, from behind a translucent blue ceiling, probably being furnished by energy bulbs. Safar was a rich man indeed to have energy bulbs within his home. Few Goreans can afford such a luxury, and indeed few care to, for Goreans, for some reason, are fond of the light of flame, lamps and torches and such. Flames must be made, tended and watched. They are more beautiful, more alive. Around the edge of the pool there were 8 large columns, fashioned and painted as though the trunks of trees, one standing at each of the 8 cardinal points of the Gorean compass. From these, stretching often across the pool, were vines, so many that the ceiling could be seen only as a patchwork of blue through the vinous entanglements. Some of the vines hung so low that they nearly touched the surface of the pool. A slave, at a sort of panel, fused with wires and levers, stood at one side. I was puzzled by the manner in which the heat and humidity were introduced to the room, for I saw no vents, nor cauldrons of boiling water, nor devices for releasing drops of water on heated plates or stones. I had been in the room for perhaps 3 or 4 minutes before I realized that the steam rose from the pool itself. I gathered that it was heated. It seemed calm, and I wondered what I was expected to meet within this pool. I would have at least the quiver. I noted that the surface of the pool, shortly after we had entered, began to tremble slightly, and it was then once again calm. I suppose something, sensing our presence, had stirred within its depths, and was now waiting. Yet the motion had been odd, for it was almost as if the pool had lifted itself, rippled, and then subsided. Harold and I, though bound, were each held by 2 men-at-arms, and another 4 with crossbows that accompanied us. "What is the nature of the beast in the pool?" I asked. "You will learn," Zephyr laughed. I conjectured it would be some sort of water animal, for nothing yet had broken the surface. It would probably be some sort of sea Litharian, or perhaps several such, sometimes smaller sea Thetharian, seemingly not much more than just teeth and tail, puttering in packs beneath the waves, are even more to be feared than their large brethren, some of whom and whose jaws an entire galley can be rushed from the sea and snapped in two like a handful of dried reeds of the rents plant. It might, too, be a bosque turtle. Some of them are quite gigantic, almost impossible to kill, persistent, and quite carnivorous. If it had been a Tharlian or a boss turtle, it might well have broken the surface for air, but it did not. This reasoning also led me to suppose that it would not likely be anything like a water sleen or a giant urt from the canals of Port Carr. These two, even before the Tharlian or the turtle, would by now presumably have surface to breathe. Therefore, whatever lay in wait within the pool must be truly aquatic, capable of absorbing its oxygen from the water itself. It might even be gilled like Korean sharks, probably a descendant of earth sharks, placed experimentally in Thassa millennia ago by the priest kings. Or it might have been the Gurdo, the layered ventral membrane, shielded by porous plating, of several of the marine predators, perhaps native to Gor, perhaps brought to Gor by priest kings by some other, more distant world than even Earth. But whatever it was, I would soon learn. "I do not care to watch this," Hakil said, "so with your permission, I shall withdraw." Safrar looked pained, but not much more so than was required by courtesy. He benignly lifted his small fat hand with the carmine fingernails and said, "By all means, my dear Hakil, withdraw if you wish." Hakil nodded curtly and turned abruptly and angrily strode from the room. "Am I to be thrown bound into the pool?" I asked. "Certainly not," said Safrar. "That would hardly be fair." "Oh, I am pleased to see that you are concerned with such matters," I said. "Such matters are very important to me," said Safrar. The expression on his face was much the same as that I had seen upon the banquet, when he had prepared to eat that small quivering thing impaled upon the colored stick. I heard the Pravashi behind the hood snicker. "Fetch the wooden shield," commanded Safrar, and two of the men-at-arms left the room. I studied the pool. It was beautiful, yellow, sparkling, as though filled with gems. There seemed to be wound through its fluids ribbons and filaments, and it was dotted here and there with small spheres of various colors. I then became aware that the steam that rose from the pool did so periodically, rather than continuously. There seemed to be a rhythm in the rising of the steam from the pool. I noted, too, that the surface of the pool, licking at the marble basin in which it lay trapped, seemed to rise slightly, and then fall with the discharge of the steam. These trains of observation was interrupted by the arrival of Saphir's two men-at-arms, bearing a wooden barrier of sorts, about 4.5 feet high and 12 feet wide, which they set between myself and my captors, and Safrir, the Pravishi, and those with the crossbow. Harold and his captors as well were not behind the barricade. It was like the curving wall of the room, decorated in exotic floral pattern. "What is the shield for?" I asked. "It is in case you might feel tempted to hurl the quiver at us," said Safrar. That seemed much foolish to me, but I said nothing. I had certain nothing in mind so ridiculous as to hurl at enemies the singular weapon which might mean life or death to me in my struggles in the yellow pool of Turia. I turned about as well as I could and examined the pool again. I still had seen nothing break the surface to breathe, and now I was determined that my unseen foe must indeed be aquatic. I hoped it would be only one thing, and two. Larger animals usually move more slowly than the smaller ones. If there were a school of 15-inch Korean pike, for example, I might kill dozens, and yet die half-eaten within minutes. "Let me be sent first to the pool," said Harold. "Nonsense,"
said Zephyr. But do not be impatient. Your turn will come.
Though it might have been my imagination, it seemed that the pool's yellow had now become enriched, and that the shifting fluid hues that confronted me had achieved new ranges of brilliance. Some of the filamentous streamers beneath the surface now seemed to roil beneath the surface, and the colors of the spheres seemed to pulsate. The rhythm of the steam seemed to increase in tempo, and I could now detect, or thought I could, more than simple moisture in that steam. Perhaps some other subtle gas or fume, perhaps hitherto unnoticed, but now increasing in its volume.
Let him be untied, said Zephyr.
While 2 men-at-arms continued to hold me, another undid the bonds on my wrists. 3 men-at-arms, with crossbows, stood ready, their weapons trained upon my back. If I succeed in slaying or escaping the monster in the pool, I said casually, I take it that I am then, of course, free?
Oh, it is only fair, said Zephyr.
Good, I said. The Paravashi in the hood threw back his head and laughed. The crossbowman also smiled.
None has, of course, said Zephyr, smiling, ever succeeded in doing either.
I see, I said. I now looked across the surface of the pool. Its appearance was now truly remarkable. It was almost as if it were lower in the center, and the edges higher near the marble basin, inching as high as they could toward our sandals. I took it that this was an optical illusion of some sort. The pool was now, it seemed, literally coruscating, glistening with a brilliance of hues that was quite phenomenal, almost like hands lifting and spilling gems in sunlit water. The filamentous strands seemed to go mad with movement, and the spheres of various colors were almost phosphorescent, pulsating beneath the surface. The steam rhythm was now swift, the gases or fumes mixed with that moisture noxious. It was almost as if the pool itself respired.
Enter the pool,
commanded Zephyr. Feet first, quiver in hand, I plunged into the yellow fluid. To my surprise, the pool, at least near the edge, was not deep. I stood in the fluid only to my knees. I took a few more steps out into the pool. It became deeper toward the center. About a third of the way toward the center, I was entered into the pool to my waist. I looked about, searching for whatever it was that would attack me. It was difficult to look into the fluid because of the deep yellow, the glistening brilliance of the surface, troubled by my passage. I noted that the steam, the gas or the fumes, no longer rose from the pool. It was quiet. The filamentous thread did not approach me. It now seemed quiet, almost as if content. The spheres, too, seemed quiescent. Some of them, mostly whitish, luminescent ones, seemed to float nearer and hovered slightly beneath the surface, in a ring about me, some 10 feet away. I took a step towards the ring and the spheres, and doubtless moved by the fluids displaced in my step, they seemed to slowly disperse and move away. The yellow of the pool's fluid, though rich, no longer seemed to leap and startle me with its vibrance. I waited for the attack of the monster. I stood so, in the fluid to my waist, perhaps 2 or 3 minutes. Then angrily, thinking perhaps this pool was indeed empty, or I had been made some fool of, cried out to Zephyr, "When is it that I meet your monster?" Over the surface I heard Zephyr, standing behind the wooden shield, laughing.
"You have met it," he said.
"You lie."
"No," he responded, amused. "You have met it." What is this monster? I cried. The pool, he shouted. The pool? Yes, said Sapphire gleefully. The pool is alive!